Okay, perfect. Lacey, I can see you. All right. Hello, everyone. It is 12 o'clock and I see that people are logging in. So I'm just going to give it about 2 more minutes so people can get up and running and situated, and then we'll get started. But real quick, I do want to make mention that I am sharing something on my screen, and I am sharing the Impact Hub, and it's a QR code. And if you want to pull out your phones and pull up this link, it is a resource that Robin's team has created that not only includes a bunch of information from the film about financial literacy and how to take control of your personal finances, but it also includes some information about some of our friends here at Babson and some of the stuff that they do. So I definitely suggest, if you have a minute, to check out that website for some more information. So we will get started in about 2 minutes. So thank you all for joining. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now just so that I can see my panelists and pull up my notes. But first and foremost, I just want to say good afternoon to everyone. And thank you very much for coming to today's panel discussion about the film Savvy. My name is Farah Narkowitz, and I am the Marketing and Events Manager for the Stephen D. Cutler Center for Investments in Finance at Babson. So for those who don't know who we are, the Cutler Center enhances Babson's innovative and practical approach to finance education through programs and resources that enrich the student learning experience, support faculty research, and engage our alumni community. So on behalf of the Cutler Center, as well as the Center for Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership and the Babson Financial Literacy Project, I want to thank you to everyone who has joined us, and a very special thank you to this incredible Babson panel who is joining us today. So before we begin, I want to make a quick mention so that we are recording this. So we are going to be able to share the link afterwards with all of our registrants and also on our YouTube page, and we'll share it out on some of our social pages. That way those who missed it can tune in, and also we can continue to share it and share the important message about how important it is for women and really anyone in general to get a hold of their personal finances. So before we begin, I do want to make one quick note that we do have an hour, so I do want to be very cognizant of time. We are going to have some time at the end for questions and answers. So if the audience has any questions in the meantime, please feel free to post those into the chat, and I will be monitoring those, and I will sort of chime back in at the end. But what I want to do right now is I just want to take a minute and welcome and introduce our moderator for today. And I'm super excited to welcome Lacey Garcia. She is the CEO and co-founder of Willow, and their mission is to financially empower women and the underrepresented through all life's journeys. So a very special welcome and hello to Lacey, and she's a good friend of Babson's. Super excited to have her on here. So Lacey, I'm going to pass over the conversation to you. So I'm going to mute myself real quick, and I'm going to shut my camera off. And then when I throw my camera back on, that will be time for audience questions. So hopefully, I know I've seen the film twice already, and I feel like I had a zillion questions after watching it just the first time. So again, anyone has questions, please submit them through the chat. All right, Lacey, it's all you.
Thank you, Farah. Thank you so much. And it's really my great pleasure to be here. I'm really fortunate to be a member of the Babson family, and that I had the good fortune of helping with the Babson Centennial a few years back. And also my co-founder is a Babson alum, Jason Aronson, from a class of 2008. So this is a topic that is very near and dear to my myself on both a personal and a professional level. And I'm so delighted that we are having this conversation appropriately on the last day of Women's History Month. Robin, this is such a powerful documentary that you put together. Robin Hauser, a Savvy film is, if you haven't seen it yet, we're so excited for you to watch it because it is incredibly powerful. And it's wonderful to have this conversation with such an esteemed group of Babson students and alum and faculty and friends here, who are also all leaders in the financial services sector. Willow is a financial education and coaching platform that helps women to take control of their financial lives and works with financial services firms and advisors to help them to do a better job in empowering women and underrepresented investors. And, throughout history, women have abdicated control of their financial lives. And this is something that I've experienced both personally and professionally, having been a financial advisor, helping women to take control. And nowadays, we know that 60% of graduates from college are women, and almost 50% of all MBA graduates, which is something the Babson community knows really well, are women. But yet, we still see amongst millennials that women are still abdicating control, first to their fathers and then to their husbands or their partners. And, Savvy does an incredible job of guiding your viewers through the horrors that can be associated with taking on student loan debt, financial abuse, predatory lending, harsh financial realities that unfortunately are still going on in our society today. And women, taking part in that, and the importance around women breaking the cycle of not taking control of their finances and securing their financial futures, and the impact that can have on generations. So it is my great pleasure now. Hold on one quick second, as I just have a little technical difficulty here, to be able to turn the conversation over to our panelists. I think first what we're going to do is ask everybody to introduce themselves and your role and why this message of Savvy is so important to you and to your work. So Robin, why don't we start with you, Robin Hauser, who is the director and producer of Savvy.
Thank you so much, Lacey. It's a pleasure to be here and to be speaking with the Cutler Center at Babson. Such an honor. I was inspired to make this film because about 6 years ago, I went through a divorce. And despite the fact that I have my MBA, I actually even worked in finance when I got out of business school for a little while. My father's an investment counselor. I was still really sort of surprised at the reality of my financial situation. And the thought of now being, for the first time in 25 years, solely responsible for my financial well-being was a little overwhelming. And I didn't know really who to turn to because, as most of us know, women don't talk about money.
I can relate with that personally and professionally. So thank you, Robin, so much. All right, Sumit Argawal.
Thank you, Lacey. Hi, everyone. My name is Sumit Agarwal. I'm a Babson MBA alum, co-founder, managing partner of FinHive, a social enterprise dedicated to providing financial education to women and young adults, women-owned startups and small businesses. This topic is important to me because financial literacy it's a means to an end. It gives you financial security, and that to me is important to make choices that you want to make for yourself and for your family. So I'm really excited to watch this movie. It was very inspiring and excited to be in this panel today.
Sumit, thank you. Thank you so much. And Jennifer Bethel. Professor Bethel. Oh, I think you're still muted.
Hi, everyone. We're delighted you could join us today. So my name is Jennifer Bethel. I'm a finance professor here at Babson and also a co-founder and faculty director of the Babson Financial Literacy Project. I got involved with financial literacy beginning about 5 years ago when I saw so many of our Babson grads were leaving a business school and not really feeling confident or capable. I also saw in my own family some issues. So this is a passion project for me. So I'm so happy to be here today.
Thank you, Professor Bethel. and for your leadership too through the Babson Literacy Project, which I'm excited to hopefully hear more about today. And we have Robert Trumbull.
Hey, Lacey. It's great to be with everybody today. My name is Rob Trumbull. I am a wealth advisor at JP Morgan. I went to Babson, received my MBA in 2014. My financial journey started when I started working at the age of 14. It was instilled in me at an early age to pay yourself first and to save. And financial literacy has become, as Jennifer mentioned, a passion project of mine. I do it both as a job and a profession, but I really care deeply about bringing that knowledge to folks that don't otherwise have access to it. I think it's fundamental to anyone's life to try to basically better prepare themselves financially and make good decisions. I think it's unfortunate that in our society, financial literacy is so low. And so it's something that, I just absolutely love my job. I love what I do. And I love these conversations and helping people come up the curve. So looking forward to this discussion.
Rob, thank you so much for your work at JP Morgan. And last but certainly not least, Andrea Torres.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Andrea Torres. I'm a sophomore here. I am studying finance and economics, and I currently serve as the president of Women Giving Back and as a mentor and director of the Babson Financial Wellness Program that goes hand in hand with the Financial Literacy Project. So yeah, definitely a passion of mine coming from a low-income background to this country to Babson with like the global scholarships. Definitely been kind of being by myself in this country has proven to me why financial literacy is so important and why it is so important that as a woman, we know like we have to raise our voice and we have to make ourselves be heard out there in the financial world as well.
Andrea, thank you very much. So to kick things off, Robin, I know you touched on this in your introduction, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how the film came to be and what really your goal was in making this film.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because when I first talked to my producers, I've made several films before this. And when I first went to my producers and I said, okay, I want to make a film about women and money, one of them was like, boring, And I thought, no, I don't think so. I think this is really important, and we won't make it boring, let's identify what are the real issues that women face, and let's find some really compelling characters and women to help us tell the story. So we looked at, we really canvassed a lot of different issues and of course people, and we came down to student loans, credit card debt, financial fragility, financial abuse, credit and credit score, compounding interest, investing. So, and those were really some of the most important issues that we knew that that we were hearing, that women were talking about. And of course, over the overlying issue being that we don't talk in our society, we don't talk about money. It's okay for men to talk about money, and so therefore they learn from each other. But it's a pretty stubborn societal norm that it's not ladylike to talk about money, right? And so that's really how we started out. And COVID hit in the middle of it, so we had to do some shifting, rearranging of some of the scenes that we wanted to film. But ultimately, I'm just thrilled with the way that the film is landing with its audience and the reaction that we're getting.
Well, thank you. It is certainly, it's not boring at all. If you haven't watched it, I know we're already getting requests for the link. It is very captivating, and it's also a little scary, right? Because these the issues that are highlighted, unless you've sort of gone through them personally, you don't necessarily realize, how susceptible, we all are. And I think just to kind of kick off the conversation with our panelists, at the beginning of Savvy, it opens with a clip, I believe, by Money's End founder Manisha Thakkar, who is asking why it is that women across all education and income levels and generations and geography, for some reason, why the majority of women have abdicated control of their personal finances. And Robin, I believe this is obviously one of the bases of creating this film, to make sure that women do not give up control. And I would say, Sumi, maybe you could talk a little bit about whether or not you agree with Manisha's Tagore's premise here that women do give up control and agency over their financial lives, and what it is you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I agree, and I see it every day. And I don't think it's because they're being deprived of this opportunity. Women like to do things when they have everything figured out, and that keeps them from taking the first step. Or perfectionists. It's about empowerment, though.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a classic mistake, to not do anything until you have read every book in the library. Another pattern that I see is when women divide responsibilities, when couples divide responsibilities, women tend to take on more tactical tasks surrounding household work, managing calendars, and even if they're working full-time, they're in charge of paying bills and, day-to-day movement of the family calendar. It really sometimes comes down to how much time you have in your day. It comes down to having the bandwidth to do those things, have a conversation with your advisor. Sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's a back and forth. And when there are 50 other things going on, there isn't enough time to return that call or make that decision. I remind my clients that it's like your annual checkup. It's meant to be preventative, and you do it before it becomes more of a managed care, because if you don't take care of it, it will come at a time where it's the worst time, and then you have to drop everything and then take care of it that way.
So true. I actually just had a advisor recently ask me, why are you so obsessed with the truth and getting everything right? It tends to be sort of historically an issue, right?
Right.
So Robert, as someone who's in the wealth management industry, are there any sort of key differences that you see between the men and the women that you work with and how they take control of their personal finances that you'd like to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, so we work with, single women, single men, married women, married men, all types of relationship dynamics and setups. And sorry, my camera just froze there. But I would say that I'm increasingly seeing women seeking to take greater control and understand. I shouldn't say control, it's more around understanding and gaining perspective on things. A lot of questions. I go way out of my way to make sure that our clients understand the what and also the why, because I think that's really important. Like I view our job as providing context, and at the end of the day, we're in the peace of mind business. Like we take a goals-based approach. So what are you trying to accomplish, and then how are we going to get there? And I find that whether it's women or men, once you help to provide that level of education and the context, that's when peace of mind comes into the equation. So I do think, having advice and having someone to bounce ideas off of, and a trusted relationship where you can ask, what you would characterize as bad questions or stupid questions, whatever, is really important. Because at the end of the day, I've been in this industry for close to 20 years. I'm still learning things every single day. There's so much to know that it's almost impossible if you don't do this for a living to really understand all the moving parts, right? Because there's so many things from saving, spending, investing, and then each of those is just there's a lot of depth. So, whether it's men or women, I just think it's so important to be able to have those educational conversations to gain that context, because it just helps put everything else into perspective.
Thank you, Rob. So true. Asking questions is so critical, and having that comfort level, that connection and that personal relationship where you feel like you can is something that we see that's an impediment a lot of the times, but really important to kind of work through. So Billy J. Hensley, the president and the CEO of the National Endowment for Financial Education, notes that only 4% of low-income students and students of color have access to financial education in school, while wealthier, whiter, school districts often provide better opportunities for financial literacy. Jennifer, from which kinds of sources do you think students should learn about their personal finances? You think of the best?
That is a great question. I think in a perfect world, we would give every young person from age 3 or 4 on up access to a trusted source. So for many of us, that will end up being family members or friends when we're younger. Maybe later it becomes some kind of a financial advisor. But there is a nuance to that trust. And I think there's a rub, and I'll speak to it in just a second, that person has our back, that they are on our train, and they have our interests first. So there's trust, and then there's also knowledge. And when we put those two criteria together, maybe it's family and friends, and to the extent that fails, then we're looking at more structured solutions, things like schools. But the reality is that only 23 states offer any kind of financial literacy education. By the way, Massachusetts is not one of those. And only 6 or 7 require an entire course. If that's not happening, then we're looking at maybe colleges, community colleges, but virtually none of them have requirements. So it's not happening in a structured educational way. There are some great online resources. I would be the first to say that there are some wonderful resources, but that's going to require that we're comfortable learning online, that we're motivated to learn online, and also that we view those as trusted. And this is no disrespect to anyone on this Zoom, but our young people are cynics. They are skeptical, many of them, of financial services institutions. They grew up with 2008. And so I think that we end up with is this financial education gap.
Yes, and lots needs to be done, but you touched on some very good solutions there. So Andrea, as you are a current student, we're eager to hear from you and your experience. So who taught you, if anyone, to manage your money, to start a savings account, or to make an early investment?
That's very interesting. And that's a great question. And actually, Professor Bethel, I'm going to echo whatever, like the thing that you just said right now. I think that definitely in a world of skepticism and 2008 tragedies just kind of replicating all over the place, definitely in a way, the internet was a great source of information, which is, in my experience, my family, I'm going to reference right now the documentary, because one of the main witnesses in there says, Yaneli, actually, she says that she was the first one of her family to not have debt. And that's actually me right now. So it's definitely been kind of like a backward situation where my family asks me for financial advice, and I am still 20 years old. I am still learning, still in college. So definitely seeing that source of the internet has helped me out. I am also have had like the courage to ask. That's also something that I feel like we should talk about more, as the taboo of not being able to ask because of the fear to be seen as, you don't know that. How could you not know that? That's basic information. That's public information, right? So at the end of the day, it's definitely been, how can I find that information by myself and for myself? So I love this type of discussion where we can actually engage in those conversations and bring that up and bring that awareness of it's okay to not know everything, and it's okay to not have that information at hand. And there are sources and there are ways, and that's exactly why the Financial Literacy Project, the Financial Wellness Project are here, so that we can actually educate others without the need of judgment or without the need of any other boundaries that we can have.
Thank you, Andrea. And it's interesting. So I'm the daughter of a Cuban refugee, and so was raised with not having any debt and actually not having, I didn't get a credit card until I was 25 years old. And I think, as we know, as Rob touched on it, and obviously Jennifer touched on it, it's very complicated, right? Because not all debt is bad debt, right? And so when you can't build credit without a credit card. And so I know, like in my mid-20s, I had bad credit because I had a library book that I hadn't returned. And that was the only thing that they could find to for my credit history. And so I had like a rude awakening in having to open a credit card and figuring out, how could I possibly I have no debt, but it's amazing, and that's sort of a lot of our history and our generational experiences obviously influence those. So it is important, I think, not only to learn from home, but also to get the education and the unbiased perspective that we can get from our schools, right? So Billy Hensley also highlights in the film that financial education used to be a part of most students' schooling. And it was actually, called, home economics or consumer economics, right? Back in the day. And it now is, as Jennifer, you highlighted, it's not required, unfortunately, in most states. So wait, why is it important for students to learn in school how to make a household budget, or to balance a checkbook, or to understand how a credit card or student loans work? Can you touch on that for us?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's important to get the training and experience when children are young and stakes are low. I will often get students in my enrichment classes who are young students who want to start trading stocks. And when I ask them, what brought you to my class? They'll often say, my parents want me to take this course, after which they may allow me to invest. Or if they are in budgeting or credit management or, any other one of those financial adulting classes, they might want to open a bank account and get a credit card afterwards. Now, school is a social experience, right? We go there because similar age kids get together, they learn similar things. It's a great place to share ideas, learn a new skill set, math, writing, science. Anytime kids get together, they learn from a teacher, they learn from each other. And when the school teaches us skills like budgeting, balancing checkbook, credit card, we can know that they not only are the ones who don't know. Students get that comfort level that it's okay. I'm not the only one who doesn't know. It's okay to ask questions. And it's okay if I don't know all the answers. So it gives them permission to learn. And most adults who step out into adulting without learning about finances then don't have that luxury to ask questions. Jennifer mentioned earlier, a few states, Florida being the latest one actually, that requires financial education to graduate high school. We need to make sure kids are getting that education experience, definitely at school, and if they can't, at home or outside of school. Home is also a place where we grow up learning our values. So money and values kind of go hand in hand, and it's important when parents have the capability, but it's hard when they don't have the capability or terminology to figure it out. Kids miss out when they don't get it at home, at school, or anywhere else, that they are likely to pick up new things before they step into that adulting life.
Thank you. So Andrea, how do you think hopefully with real-time experience, learning these activities in school compares or differs from, watching friends and family, and what's the importance of having both?
That's actually a great question. I think that one of the main things in this kind of journey is that the fact that I actually joined the financial literacy project because I wanted to learn for myself, but also because I wanted to help others learn about it, right? So with the help of Professor Beto, she just exactly taught me from budgeting, and I also got to attend other workshops that went all the way to credit cards, right? So learning all those resources and taking advantage of all those resources in class, or not in class, but extracurricularly, just made a significant difference in a way that I was kind of teaching for myself and by myself, and in a way that I had to make sure that I knew the things because I knew that they were going to help me at the end of the day. So it felt like a class at some point, and I also definitely felt like I was a step behind everyone else that just had their stocks from the day. Like I remember coming here to Babson and people had their stocks since freshman year, stuff like that. That people knew about trading, people knew about savings from day one, and I just felt different. I felt foreign, and so learning through that has definitely been a step behind. However, with certain dedication and certain empowerment, I definitely feel that I have the confidence now to just, I have my IRA, I have my savings account, I have my credit card. It's definitely been different. Do I wish that I had received that knowledge beforehand and with my family? Obviously, I think it would have helped them and it would have helped me with my future endeavors. But nowadays, with the situation that I have, I definitely am grateful for all the advantage and all the resources that Professor Bethel and everyone else at Babson have given me. It's definitely been a really grateful experience.
Thank you. So Savvy features Yanli Espinal, a first-generation college student and daughter of Dominican immigrants who is a college student who pays only the minimum on their credit card bills while sending extra cash to her parents, not understanding that interest was piling up on her credit card balances, which I think is something that happens to many, as we know, data-wise, happens to so many. So Andrea, we're going to keep you on the hot seat. So why do you think that Yanli references the generational cycle of poverty when telling her story?
That's a great question. It's actually linked with a lot of different terms. I would definitely say that the difference between a principal repayment and interest payment is it's something that people lack of. So people think that they can take out the money, just give it back whenever, or just give it back after a certain amount of years, and use that for funding other other things that they have in mind, which is totally fine. The thing is that people and also financial institutions try to, in my opinion, should try to make things a little bit more clear when dealing with people in a situation of low income or a situation of lack of financial literacy, once again, right? So at the end of the day, the cycle of poverty is definitely nourished by this type of lack of communication or miscommunication between them, or people that do not read between the lines that sometimes financial institutions don't want you to read between the lines, right? So it depends on the situation as well and context and everything. But at the end of the day, it is important to know that the cycle of poverty will definitely continue and someone has to break it at the end of the day. And that's what kind of hits harder. And someone has to take the responsibility of being financially aware. Someone has to take the deep dive into financial literacy. And that's exactly where the cycle of poverty, a little bit, little by little, can be broken from a perspective of, the consumer or the borrower at the same time.
Thank you. And it also shines a light on why it is so important for women to take control, as women are leading many, many households, right? And it is incredibly important. So Sumit, why should people balance helping loved ones financially with their own needs of being financially secure, which I know from firsthand experience, I've made wrong decisions here. So this can be a very tricky one when you are trying to support your loved ones. But can you talk to us about that? It's really important.
Yeah. I always say, put on your oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
Money is the number one cause of stress, whether it's in your lives or lives in your loved ones. If you're not financially or physically healthy, your loved ones will suffer too, regardless. It's important to help family, but it's also important to not borrow from your own future. Yaneli's example is just so inspiring. Having that balance is important.
Yeah.
78% of US workers live paycheck to paycheck. There really isn't a lot of wiggle room for those people. And how you can start, helping your loved ones and balancing your own lives is create an emergency cash fund, have at least 6 to 9 months of monthly expenses saved. Do people even know what that is? What are your monthly expenses? It really starts from very basic budgeting. 2/3 of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. Most of us may remember when the government shut down a few years ago, most of the federal employees were lining up at the food pantry. It's so hard to watch when this happens to people with stable jobs and predictable income. And when it comes, to an expense, including helping family, create a budget, know how much you can help them with. And personal loans will always carry a high interest, and it's important to pay off that debt and not carry it month over month. I'll add that if you're loaning money to family, consider it as a gift. Don't expect to get it back. That's one of the biggest expectations that can ruin the relationship, as well as put you back into your own, financial distress that you were hoping to come out from once that money came back.
Very, very good points. And it's tricky. It's tricky. It can be very, very different. As we know, money can be incredibly emotional, right? So financial expert Stacey Francis says that married women are the hardest to reach with financial education, and that they don't come to us typically unless something has happened in their life where they're now having to make financial decisions on their own. So Rob, what are the financial questions that partnered individuals, and especially partnered women, can ask of their partners before they move in together or that they get married, to hopefully not end up in some of the situations that I'm sure that you see, I know I see on a daily basis?
Yeah, Lacey, I think the question is, what's the plan? Like what is our income level? What is our spending level? Women typically are pretty well versed on the spending side, I would say. On the income side, and then the saving side, I think that's where you end up with some gaps, right? So, know how much is going out, but in some cases don't fully appreciate how much is coming in and what the delta is, and what that means for the overall planning. So I think the question is simply, what's the plan, right? If it is, in this case, what you're suggesting, with married women who are less up to speed on what's going on with the finances, I think it's really a simple conversation around, what's the plan? And at the end of the day, I think that's so fundamentally important. I've seen some of the questions come through in the chat. I really think, it's very important to stress that this is important for everyone, regardless of income level. And arguably even more important, at a lower income level, right? And because it's holes that are dug are that much harder to get out of, right? And so I think it's so fundamentally important to understand some of the just very basic concepts that Jennifer and her team have put together around, creating a budget. Fundamentally, if you spend less than you earn in your life, like, you should be okay. That's part of the challenge that a lot of people run into, right? It's like not understanding the budget side of things and just spending on the fly, and then coming up for air at some point and saying, oh, wait, hold on, time out. I'm in the hole. How am I going to get out? Right? That's what a lot of people find themselves in that situation. So to answer your question, I think what's the plan is the real key question, which should then trigger the conversation around, just fundamentally understanding the income level, the spending level, and what the plan is. If it's a deficit or if it's a surplus, what you're going to do with either of those.
Definitely. And I know that, finances are one of the leading causes of challenges in marriages and partnerships and divorce. And I know even as difficult as the situation that you might find yourself in, it's better to have a hard conversation prior, right? Ask the difficult questions sort of about what your priorities and your values and what the real economics look like. And there are obviously, working with a wealth manager, such as yourself, or there are so many resources, there are resources out there that can help you to have this conversation, or working with a coach. But it is so critical, to your point, to come up with a plan, right? Ask those questions and have a plan. Or you can find out very easily being in a situation that could have been avoidable. So thank you, Rob. Impact investment advisor Rachel Robiscotti points out that white Americans have 10 times the wealth of Black Americans, a figure often generally referred to as the racial wealth gap in the US. So Professor Bethel, Jennifer, how do factors like race, gender, and immigration status compound to create vast inequities between the financial literacy of some Americans opposed to others?
Yeah, so this is true disclosure. This is actually why I got into the financial literacy area. Um, this exact statistic. There's obviously an income gap. There's also a wealth gap. And at the time, my co-founder, Kathy Hebert, who's also a finance professor at Babson, we didn't really have a lot to say about the income gap, but we really thought we might be able to help with the wealth gap. And it's gender, it's race, you take almost any demographic and you will see differences in wealth. And when it comes to that, we're finally getting some great statistical evidence that shows financial education helps. It took us actually a long time, surprisingly long time to be able to prove that it helps, but it does. And so when we talk about race, gender, immigration status, it really comes back to where do you learn and who is there to help you learn. And there are differences. So I'm going to take immigration. So Andrea, you and Lacey both indicated that you are first generation in the United States. Your parents actually might have known a lot about the financial system in your home countries and their home countries, but they get here and everything is different. And so suddenly it's not even like they're here, a plane ride drops them here, right? And so you see this over and over again. You also see differences in how people think about money. Different cultural groups think about money differently. And so oftentimes we'll see that will also play into it. So I was talking with a young man recently who said, Professor Bethel, this is all good and great, but my people, we don't put money in banks and we don't invest because the country that he came from, banks fail. And about the quickest way to lose your wealth is to put it in a bank. Mm-hmm. And so this is where I think financial education helps, because I can say with a high degree of confidence, if you put it in a federally insured bank, the federal government will guarantee it up to $250,000. Please, at a minimum, put it in a bank. If you invest it, we have something called SIPC, right? And SIPC is going to make sure nobody steals it. They can't guarantee your return, but they guarantee no one's going to steal it. So, I think this is where there are big cultural and sort of other types of background differences between people.
It's incredibly nuanced and so true. I've seen that firsthand in so many different examples in financial education. Yeah, literacy is so critical. Thank you, Professor Bethel. So financial journalist Farnoosh Torabi says that when women are financially independent, the world becomes a better place, which I very firmly believe in as well. But Jennifer, or actually Robin, can you lead us off and talk about who benefits when women have access to financial education and the opportunity to control their own finances?
Yeah, I agree with Farnoosh Torabi that the world benefits, everybody benefits for a couple different reasons, right? Number one, when women are financially savvy, since women typically are the primary caregiver, they tend to educate their children, right, about money. And so that's an important thing. There's also, we're in the middle of something called the great transfer of wealth, and money is going into the hands primarily of women. And so what's interesting is that studies have shown that women tend to have sort of greater screens or filters in terms of investing, right? They care a little bit more about environmental and social good, ESG investing. And so when you think about how the world can really become a better place when we're investing in, say, the environment or in education or in healthcare, I think that that's a way that the world can be a better place when women are financially savvy. And the interesting thing about this too is that men are our allies. They should be. It's not like men are trying to keep women out of the financial world. In fact, I've talked to many spouses, partners, husbands who have said, I've been trying to get my wife to come with me to these, financial meetings, and she just has no interest. And I think we've already discussed why that might be, right? I mean, I think that there's a shame factor. Women, smart women, feel intimidated by it, by some of the acronyms and the terms, the terminology, because it is a very male-dominated industry. But when women and know as much as their partner, whether they're in same-sex relationships or heterosexual relationships, they're more prepared for a crisis. They're more prepared if suddenly their partner, wasn't there, whether that's divorce or death or something. And so these are really, really important reasons. And the most important reason, I think, is that women earn less than men. Sadly, we earn about 80 cents on the dollar. We spend more time out of the workforce to care for elderly and our children. So therefore, we have less Social Security and we live longer. Right. So we actually, I think that the statistic is that women 65 and older are 80% more likely to live in poverty than men of the same age. I mean, that's a problem, right? The whole world suffers when that's the case.
No, you are preaching to me. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And the data is so compelling. And in fact, also, so many women who may be listening to this or maybe not listening to this, which, they don't realize that, 80 to 90% of all women will be solely responsible for their own finances and for their family finances at some point in their lives, because they do outlive men and as well as, these other circumstances. So it is so important. And I always say that the world wins with more women investors, right? Not only the next generation, but yes, better, more sustainable companies and products and services, and more growth for the global wealth pool, as well as women are controlling more and more of the wealth. Well, I think we're gonna close up with the panel and then take some questions. But before we do that, Robin, again, thank you for creating such, a powerful documentary and shining a light on such an important and, quite frankly, I think a fixable issue, right? It's something that we can all proactively. This panel has talked about things that we ourselves can proactively do, and ways that we can help, our partners and our children and our friends. And it is so true that, that men and folks of all genders can help to solve this really, really important challenge. It's critical. So I think I'll kind of ask, everybody to touch on what their major takeaway from the film was, and sort of any advice to the folks who are listening. So why don't we start with you, Professor Bethel?
I think my takeaway is it's never too late to start. You can't change your path, your historic path, but today is today, and today you can start, and that will change your trajectory going forward. So that was my big takeaway today. Do it.
Thank you. So true. So true. And Andrea.
Yeah, I think my greatest takeaway would definitely be something surrounding that fact, and the fact that if you have any sort of fear, the best you can do is ask. Lose that fear of asking, and lose that fear, because it's better to ask now than to make some sort of financial mistake that could lead us to not a great situation.
Very, very wise. Very wise. That's so true. Sumit.
Yeah, so my biggest takeaway is taking charge of your own financial life is not optional. You don't have to have everything figured out to get started. And if every woman needs to know one thing, it is that 8 out of 10, as Lacey, you mentioned as well, will be solely responsible for your own financial well-being at some point in your life. It's better to do it when you don't need it that much versus when you're forced to take charge. You have a much better chance of success if it's on your own terms.
Rob.
Yeah, I would just say that I think this is a health and wellness issue. There's a lot of focus on, health and wellness, whether it's physical health, nutrition, mental health. I think, financial security and understanding finances is a fundamental health and wellness issue that, you asked earlier, what would the impact be on the world if people, knew more about finances and had a better plan? I think people would walk around the streets more confidently. And, it really would help them with their mental peace. So I think that it really is truly a fundamental health and wellness issue.
So true. Thank you, Rob. And Robin, have you give your closing remarks on.
Okay, well, I'm going to get right down to like specifics
Yeah.
because aside from talking to your partner about money, if you have a partner, that's important. Make it an easy, open conversation. Just start that way. And then knowing that I'm probably speaking to a fairly young audience, when you get your first job, make sure you contribute whatever your company's willing to match. You have to contribute that much to your 401k every time. Just do it. And in 30 years, 40 years, you're going to be happy that you did.
So true. Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists. And now, Farah, I'm going to turn it over to you. I believe you've got some questions from the folks who have joined us on the webinar.
Yes, I do. I do have a couple questions, and I actually want to start off with Robin. So given the conversation, how it's so difficult to have these types of conversations, you were able to create a film with multiple subjects talking about some pretty heavy subject matters, and in some cases, some pretty traumatic experiences. So how are you able to go out and find people that were willing to sort of put their lives in front of the country, in front of the world, and say, here's my story, which may or may not be pretty, but try to use it to sort of help people?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have an amazing production team, and producer Tierney Henderson in particular is really fabulous at researching. We probably interviewed 5 times or 6 times the number of people that are actually in the film looking for compelling stories. And we heard some pretty outrageous stories too, but we didn't want to tell stories that were so one-off that the audience couldn't relate. We really needed to find stories that the audience could think, wow, that could happen to me, right? Or, ooh, that is happening to me. So that's an important thing. You want the stories to be believable enough, and of course they're real, but that the audience can react to them. At the same time, I didn't want the film to be so down and heavy that people walked away thinking, well, I'm never going to get on top of this. So if you notice, each one of the characters has their own sort of personal arc. They've all come out on top. Yaneli paid off her debt. Caitlin Boyle paid off her, unbelievable $222,000 student loan debt. Chanel lost her husband, but she's come out writing a book and starting a webpage to help other women. So that was important to us also, that there was an arc and that they, have come out as empowered women, so that ultimately the film is inspiring.
Excellent. So I do have one other question that came through, and I can sort of share this with the group, but maybe Rob, I'll start with you. But a very interesting question in regards to younger generations are very much attracted to quick, rich schemes, especially when someone sees the friend next door making millions of dollars, and you see everything on Instagram, and there's this whole sort of altered reality. And how do you make sure, or how do you suggest to spread more awareness around this so that people understand that that might not be the case for them and one needs to be responsible?
Yeah, no, it's a fundamental challenge. I think, especially with social media and the commercialization of our society, I think it is really hard for young people to kind of disconnect reality from this alternate universe, right? Where everyone's driving around in a fancy car and wearing expensive clothes, and it's really difficult. I think on the planning side, it's really important to take a long-term view and to understand that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And it's true, right? I mean, you really want to be constantly moving forward. And if you do that, as Robin mentioned, you pick your head up, 5, 10, 20 years later, you'll be in a really good place, right? So it is a marathon, not a sprint. Certainly there are examples of people who, do really well in short spurts, But, you know, for every single one of those success stories, there's, you know, 1,000 failures. So I think it's really, you know, you don't see a lot of those stories written, you know, so you see more of the successes than you do the failures. So I just think it's really important to keep perspective, but it is a real challenge. I've got 2 children of my own, and it's a challenge as I raise them to try to make sure that they understand that kind of difference between, you know, what they're seeing and then reality. So take a long-term view, marathon, not a sprint, do the right thing. It compounds over time and you'll be in a good space.
Excellent. I'm just closely watching the clock, so I just want to bring in one more question. But I know in general, as I see questions coming in, a lot of them are asking about resources and opportunities. So I do want to make mention in the chat, I did include a link to the Impact Hub, which has a ton of resources, not only from the film, but also from within the Babson community. And I do want to make mention that here at Babson, we do offer some personal finance course for our students. But I know obviously we have some people here on the panel that are specifically involved in some programs. And Jennifer, if you can maybe just quickly touch upon what the Babson Financial Literacy Project does. And then Andrea, if you can sort of talk about your role and what you do as a student, and then we can sort of start to wrap things up.
Yeah, so really quickly, we work with a number of colleges and universities, community colleges, to bring financial literacy. So especially if you're in Southern California, it is quite likely that you've seen some of our workshops. Here in Massachusetts, we're working through the Boston Public Library and 8 other libraries in the greater Massachusetts area. So if you're interested in workshops, please go look at your local library's website, because we're doing a workshop series. I'm going to actually turn it over to Andrea. Andrea's she's working directly with Babson students and also with some folks in Boston as well. So Andrea, off to you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm one of the directors of the Babson Financial Wellness Program, and what we basically focus on is empowering the students and making them mentors to others. So we work with the BOW community, so with Babson All in Wellesley colleges, to teach them about, again, budgeting, credit cards, student loans, any other of interest repayments, life after college also as well. And then on the other side, we also work with the Boys and Girls Club in the greater Boston area to teach them a little bit more about, we're talking about high schoolers, middle schoolers, where you teach them a little bit more regarding on coming into college or life as, you know, financial literacy for young people. So it's definitely been grateful to have that experience to empower others, to teach others. So once again, we're creating a safe zone of no judgment. And we also want to just share the experience of no one deserves to walk around life without knowing what to do with their finances. So we definitely believe in this fundamental values that the Babson Financial Literacy Project also shares. So it's been a really good experience. I'm really grateful to do this. It's my second year doing this, so definitely hopeful to just continue to do this experience throughout my whole 4 years. And yeah, thank you and kudos to Professor Bethel, because she's been my mentoring guide throughout all this.
Awesome. So in the interest of time, I just want to end before we wrap up, I do just again want to reiterate, definitely check out the Impact Hub. There's a ton of information in there and resources. So I'm seeing a lot of questions about where do we go for this? Where do we go for that? I feel like if you have questions, that is the place to go. I know there was also some questions about investing and different resources along that end. And Robin had suggested to look into Elevest. Speaking of Elevest, I just want everyone to know that the Cutler Center is actually going to be hosting a speaker series next Tuesday morning with Sally Krawcheck, the CEO of Elevest, that Jennifer will be moderating. That is open to anyone and everyone. So I just dropped the link in the chat real quick. So if you're interested, please sign up. She has an incredible story, an incredible background. She was very fascinating to watch in this film. So super excited for that. But before we wrap up, I have to say thank you first off to our panelists. Thank you for not only joining us today, but also for being so involved in making sure that you are out there and you are teaching and you are making it so that people who might not necessarily have the opportunity to learn about this are. And I think that's super important. And a very special thank you to Lacey, our moderator, for hosting this session and keeping everyone in line. And just thank you so much for all of the work that you are doing as well. And last but not least, certainly thank you to Robin, who we would not be here today if it wasn't for you and this incredible film. So thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoyed the film, enjoyed this hour. And we are recording this and we will be sharing this out. So hopefully we can continue to share and continue to educate others. So thank you all so much for joining. Have a great Thursday afternoon, and I hope to see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.